What if some horror films were never meant to be seen? Not because they failed, but because they went too far, too real, too disturbing. Tonight we are diving into 10 banned horror films from the 1980s that pushed limits beyond control. These are not just movies. They are controversies, investigations, nightmares that refuse to stay on screen. And the deeper we go, the more unsettling the truth becomes. Number 10. Faces of Death, 1978. There is something deeply unsettling about a film that refuses to tell you where reality ends and performance begins. Faces of Death does exactly that. It does not behave like a horror movie. It behaves like evidence. That is precisely why it terrified governments more than audiences. Released under the direction of John Allen Schwartz, the film presents itself as a documentary. A calm narrator guides viewers through scenes of death across the world. Executions, accidents, animal killings, medical procedures. The structure is cold, clinical, almost educational. But that tone is the trap. Because behind that presentation lies a disturbing question. How much of this is real? During the 1980s, the film became a lightning rod for controversy. Authorities in multiple countries seized copies, not because it was simply violent, but because it blurred the line between exploitation and documentation. Some sequences were staged, others were authentic, and the audience was never told which was which. That uncertainty created panic. If even a portion of what viewers were seeing was real, then the film was not entertainment. It was something else entirely. Bans followed. Distribution collapsed in several regions. Retailers refused to stock it. Customs officials confiscated shipments. The film was labeled dangerous not only for its content, but for its intent. It invited viewers to witness death as spectacle. No moral lesson. No narrative justification. Just observation. Even today, the legacy lingers. While versions circulate online and through niche distributors, the film remains restricted or heavily scrutinized in certain territories. Its reputation continues to overshadow its availability. Because the real horror is not in any single scene. It is in the possibility that what you are watching might not be fiction at all. And once that idea enters your mind, it does not leave easily. Which raises a darker thought. If this was number 10, then what kind of films could possibly be worse? Number 9. Snuff. 1976. There are films that disturb audiences, and then there are films that manipulate reality itself. Snuff does not just shock, it deceives. And that deception is what turned it into one of the most controversial titles of the 1980s. Originally produced as a low-budget exploitation film, it was later re-edited and marketed with a far more dangerous idea. That what you were about to see was real. The final moments of the film present what appears to be an unsimulated murder. A sudden shift in tone, a breakdown of cinematic structure, a moment designed to feel like something went wrong during production. That illusion triggered immediate backlash. Viewers were not reacting to special effects. They believed they had witnessed an actual killing. Protest groups formed. Theaters faced pressure. Authorities began to investigate. Because if the claim was true, this was not a film. It was evidence of a crime. During the 1980s, the controversy escalated. The film was banned in multiple countries, seized, restricted. Its reputation grew not because of artistic merit, but because of the fear it created. The fear that cinema could be used to disguise something real. Even after it was confirmed that the footage was staged, the damage had already been done. The film became synonymous with the idea of snuff cinema, a concept that blurred the line between fiction and reality in a way that unsettled both audiences and authorities. To this day, snuff remains controversial and restricted in certain regions, not because of what it definitively shows, but because of what it convinced people it might show. And that is what makes it so disturbing. It weaponized belief. It turned uncertainty into fear. And it proved that sometimes the most dangerous horror is not what you see. It is what you think you are seeing. Number 8. Men Behind the Sun, 1988. History can be horrifying. But when cinema attempts to recreate that horror without restraint, it becomes something far more dangerous. Men Behind the Sun is not just a war film. It is an experience that feels closer to witnessing forbidden documentation than watching a scripted story. Directed by T.F. Mu, the film explores the atrocities of Japan's Unit 731 during World War II. This alone would make it disturbing. But what sets it apart is the way it presents those events. There is no attempt to soften the brutality, no cinematic distance. The violence is shown in a way that feels mechanical and procedural, as if you are watching experiments unfold rather than scenes being performed. Rumors quickly surrounded the production. Claims that real cadavers were used, that certain sequences were not entirely simulated. Whether fully accurate or not, these allegations intensified the backlash. Because the film did not feel like fiction, it felt like something unearthed. Governments reacted accordingly. Bans appeared across multiple countries. Censorship boards struggled to classify it, not because it was simply violent, but because it blurred the boundary between historical reconstruction and exploitation. Some argued it was educational. Others insisted it crossed ethical lines that cinema should never approach. Even decades later, the film remains difficult to distribute in its original form. Versions that do exist are often edited. Screenings are limited. Discussions remain divided. Is it a necessary confrontation with history or an unforgivable act of cinematic excess? What makes it linger is not just what it shows, it is how it shows it. Detached, methodical, almost indifferent. That tone strips away any sense of safety. There is no dramatic music guiding your emotions, no heroic narrative to hold on to. Just a steady descent into something deeply human and deeply unsettling. And once you experience that kind of horror, you begin to realize something uncomfortable. Some films are banned not because they are fictional nightmares, but because they feel too close to reality. Number 7. Nekromantik, 1987. There are boundaries in cinema that most filmmakers understand without being told. Lines that should not be crossed, subjects that should not be explored in explicit detail. Nekromantik does not just cross those lines, it ignores them completely. Directed by Jörg Buttgereit, this German underground film centers on a subject rarely depicted so openly: necrophilia. Not implied, not suggested, but presented as part of an unsettling domestic narrative. The film follows a couple whose relationship becomes entangled with death itself, and it does so with a tone that refuses to guide the viewer toward comfort or judgment. The result is deeply disorienting, because the film does not behave like a traditional horror story. There is no clear villain, no structured escalation. Instead, it presents disturbing acts with an almost mundane normality. That contrast between the ordinary and the grotesque creates a kind of psychological unease that lingers far beyond the screen. Authorities reacted quickly. The film was banned in Germany upon release. Copies were seized. Legal action followed. Other countries imposed their own restrictions, not simply because of graphic content, but because of what the film represented: a deliberate challenge to moral and cultural boundaries. Even today, the film remains restricted in several regions. Distribution is limited. Classification boards continue to struggle with it, because it raises a difficult question. Where does artistic expression end and unacceptable content begin? What makes Nekromantik so enduringly controversial is not just its subject matter, it is its refusal to explain itself. There is no justification, no moral conclusion. It presents its world and leaves the viewer alone with it. And that silence is what makes it dangerous. Because without guidance, the audience is forced to confront their own reaction, their own limits, their own discomfort. By this point, the pattern becomes clear. These films are not banned only because of what they show. They are banned because of how they make you feel. Number 6. Angst, 1983. Some horror films rely on monsters, others rely on violence, but Angst relies on something far more disturbing. It places you inside the mind of a killer and refuses to let you leave. Directed by Gerald Kargel, this Austrian film does not follow traditional storytelling. There is no mystery about who the killer is, no gradual reveal. From the opening moments, you are trapped in his perspective. His thoughts guide the narrative. His impulses dictate the pacing. His presence fills every frame. The camera work plays a crucial role. It moves with unnatural precision, sliding through spaces, watching from impossible angles, creating the sense that you are not just observing the character, but becoming him. This is where the film crosses into dangerous territory. It does not present violence as spectacle. It presents it as process. The crimes themselves are sudden, chaotic, uncomfortably intimate. But what lingers is not the acts. It is the internal narration, the calm explanation of impulses that should never be explained. The attempt to rationalize something that cannot be justified. That psychological access is what made authorities uneasy. When the film was released, it faced immediate backlash, banned in several European countries, pulled from circulation. For years, it remained nearly impossible to find, not because it was the most graphic film of its time, but because it felt too real, too plausible, too close to something that could exist outside the screen. Even today, its distribution remains limited. It is often discussed more than it is watched, a film with a reputation that precedes it. Because once you understand what it does, you hesitate before experiencing it. What makes Angst so effective is its restraint. It does not overwhelm you with constant shock. It builds a quiet, suffocating atmosphere. Number 5. Tenebrae, 1982. Violence in cinema often serves a purpose. It advances the plot. It reveals character. It creates tension. But in Tenebrae, violence becomes something else entirely. It becomes a statement. And that statement unsettled entire countries. Directed by Dario Argento, this Italian horror film operates on multiple levels. On the surface, it is a murder mystery. A writer becomes entangled in a series of killings that mirror his own work. But beneath that structure lies a deeper exploration of obsession. Form of art reflecting violence, and violence reflecting art. What makes the film controversial is not just its content, it is its presentation. The camera does not hide from brutality. It lingers. It stylizes. It transforms acts of violence into carefully composed sequences, almost beautiful in their precision. That aesthetic approach created a divide. Some viewed it as artistic expression. Others saw it as glorification. During the 1980s, the film became part of the infamous video nasties panic in the United Kingdom. It was banned, cut, restricted. Versions were heavily edited to remove key scenes. The original vision was fragmented, not because it was incomprehensible, but because it was considered too intense for public consumption. The controversy extended beyond censorship. Critics debated its intent. Was it condemning violence or indulging in it? Was it a critique of obsession or a reflection of it? Those questions remain unresolved. And that ambiguity is what gives the film its lasting power. Even today, some regions still circulate edited versions. The uncut experience is not universally accessible. Its reputation continues to shape how it is distributed and perceived. What separates Tenebrae from other banned films is its intelligence. It does not rely solely on shock. It engages with the idea of violence as part of storytelling itself. And in doing so, it forces the audience to confront their own role. Because if violence is presented as art, then what does that say about the viewer who watches it? By this point, the pattern has evolved. These films are no longer just disturbing, they are confrontational. They challenge not only what can be shown, but why it is shown. Number 4. Cannibal Ferox, 1981. There are films that provoke outrage, and then there are films that seem designed to provoke it. Cannibal Ferox belongs firmly in the second category. It does not simply cross boundaries. It appears to seek them out and destroy them one by one. Directed by Umberto Lenzi, the film emerged during the height of the Italian cannibal exploitation wave, a subgenre already steeped in controversy. But even within that context, this film stood apart, not because of its story, which follows a familiar structure of outsiders encountering a remote tribe, but because of its intensity. Its willingness to show brutality in a raw and unfiltered way. The violence is not quick. It is not stylized. It is prolonged, deliberate. These scenes unfold with a kind of persistence that forces the viewer to endure rather than observe. And that endurance is what made authorities react so strongly. The film was banned in more than 30 countries, confiscated, seized, removed from shelves. In some cases, possession itself became a legal risk. Animal cruelty played a major role in the backlash. Real acts were captured on film. That alone was enough to push it beyond what many censorship boards would tolerate. But the controversy went deeper. Critics argued that the film blurred the line between depiction and exploitation, that it used shock not as a tool, but as a foundation. There was no distance, no buffer, just a relentless sequence of events designed to disturb. Even today, the film's distribution remains complicated. Uncut versions are not universally available. Some regions still enforce restrictions. Others allow only heavily edited releases. Its reputation continues to define how it is handled. What makes Cannibal Ferox so difficult to reconcile is its intent. It does not disguise what it is. It does not pretend to be subtle. It confronts the viewer directly, almost defiantly, and that confrontation leaves an impact. Because once you experience that level of unfiltered brutality, it becomes clear that some films are not meant to entertain. They are meant to test limits, which leads to an even more unsettling realization. What if a film goes beyond testing limits and begins to erase them entirely? Number 3. The Beyond, 1981. Horror often follows rules. Even at its most extreme, there is usually a structure, a logic, a sense that the chaos exists within boundaries. The Beyond does not follow those rules. It dismantles them. Directed by Lucio Fulci, this film is less a narrative and more a descent, a slow unraveling of reality where cause and effect lose meaning. The story begins with a simple premise: a woman inherits a hotel. But that premise quickly dissolves into something far more abstract, a world where the line between life and death is no longer stable. The imagery is what defines the experience, not just violent but surreal. Eyes, blood, decay. Each element presented with a dreamlike quality that makes it difficult to process. Scenes do not build toward resolution. They drift. They linger. They exist in a space that feels detached from logic. During the 1980s, this approach combined with graphic content placed the film firmly within the video nasties controversy. It was banned, cut, altered. Versions were released with significant edits. The original vision was fragmented across different markets. But what truly unsettled censors was not just the gore. It was the atmosphere. The sense that the film was not guiding the viewer toward understanding. It offered no clear meaning, no moral structure, just an overwhelming sense of dread. Even today, access to fully uncut versions varies by region. Some releases restore the original content. Others remain edited. The film's legacy continues to be shaped by its controversial history. What makes The Beyond so enduring is its unpredictability. It does not follow expectations. It does not provide comfort. It creates a world where anything can happen and nothing needs to be explained. And in that absence of explanation, something unsettling emerges. Because when horror is no longer bound by rules, it becomes impossible to anticipate. By this stage, the pattern has shifted again. These films are no longer just extreme. They are disorienting. They challenge perception itself. Number 2. Nightmares in a Damaged Brain, 1981. There are films that disturb audiences. And then there are films that disturb entire legal systems. Nightmares in a Damaged Brain belongs to the second category. It did not just provoke outrage, it resulted in arrests. Directed by Romano Scavolini, the film follows a deeply unstable killer, driven by fractured memories and violent impulses. On the surface, it resembles a typical slasher narrative, but beneath that structure lies something far more aggressive, a relentless focus on brutality that refuses to soften its impact. The violence is immediate, unpredictable, and presented with a rawness that feels almost invasive. There is no stylization to create distance, no artistic framing to cushion the experience. Instead, the film pushes forward with a kind of intensity that makes each moment feel unavoidable. During the 1980s, the film became one of the most controversial entries in the United Kingdom's video nasties crackdown. Authorities did not simply ban it, they prosecuted those involved in its distribution. A distributor was sentenced to prison. That alone places the film in a category few others occupy. It was not just considered inappropriate, it was treated as criminal. This reaction was not only about the content, it was about the perceived intent. The film was seen as crossing a line between representation and endorsement. A work that did not merely depict violence but seemed to revel in it. That interpretation fueled the legal response. Even today, the film remains difficult to access in its original form. Versions that circulate are often edited. Its reputation continues to overshadow its availability. Because once a film becomes associated with real-world consequences, that association does not fade easily. What makes Nightmares in a Damaged Brain so unsettling is not just what it shows, it is what it represents. A moment in time when cinema collided with law. when a film was not just controversial but prosecutable. And if number 2 could trigger that level of reaction, then number 1 must represent something even more extreme. Something that did not just challenge boundaries, something that erased them entirely. Number 1. Cannibal Holocaust, 1980. Some films are banned for what they show, others are banned for what people believe they show. Cannibal Holocaust exists at the intersection of both. It is not just controversial, it is legendary for the chaos it created. Directed by Ruggero Deodato, the film introduced a structure that would later influence an entire subgenre: found footage, a narrative built around recovered reels documenting a lost film crew. But at the time, this approach was not familiar. It was convincing. Too convincing. When the film was released, authorities reacted immediately. It was seized, banned, investigated. Deodato himself was arrested, charged under suspicion that the film contained real murders. The actors had to appear in court to prove they were alive. That single detail captures the scale of the controversy. A film so realistic that it blurred the line between fiction and crime. The content intensified the reaction. Graphic violence, sexual assault, real animal killings, scenes presented without traditional cinematic cues. No clear separation between performance and reality. The result was a viewing experience that felt less like a movie and more like evidence. Countries across the world imposed bans. Some lifted them years later with heavy cuts. Others maintained restrictions. Even today, the film's distribution is controlled in several regions. Uncut versions are not universally available. Its legacy continues to shape how it is perceived and handled. What makes Cannibal Holocaust so significant is not just its content, it is its impact. It forced legal systems to respond. It changed how films were classified. It redefined what audiences believed cinema could be. And that is why it holds the number 1 position, because it did not just shock viewers. It altered the relationship between film and reality itself. These films were not just banned for shock. They were banned because they changed something. In audiences, in authorities, in cinema itself. The question is not whether you can watch them. The question is whether you should. And once you cross that line, there is no going back.